It is time for another Techie Talk. State Representative Techie Chan of Quincy joins us for our weekly update. Hi, Techie.
Hey, good to see you, Joe. And we found the high definition function on Zoom today.
Yes, if people can see more of my wrinkles and gray hairs and more of your dining room, that's why.
I know you can see the wonderful dish shelf on the other side, which normally is obstructed most days, unless you get the pre-recording videos of me that I do off my phone in high definition, which is also pretty interesting through COVID, as I'm constantly adjusting my cell phone to try to line things up. But the world we live in now.
Yeah, it's only taken us 2 years to figure it out. So,
Yeah, it's kind of surprising, right? We're finding new features every day. I'm just happy I'm not using the dog face feature or other types of Zoom related graphics, which I understand is always fun, but not necessarily good for work.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think the whole novelty of using Zoom is pretty much over.
I agree with that. Obviously the stock prices are reflecting Zoom's, slow down. I mean, if you invested this in January 2020, obviously you've made it like a bandit. But as we more come to some in-person living with COVID as opposed to going to zero COVID tolerance, people, take the precautions and risk levels they're willing to do. And I remind folks, folks that are still uncomfortable or immune compromised, or maybe taking care of people immune compromised, or work in a setting where you could expose to people that could still suffer severe illness, even though they're not die. I mean, nobody wants to be sick. So, people should continue to wear the mask, and I, hope people continue to practice good hygiene. I mean, this, again, I said this in 2020. I'm shocked that people don't know what good hygiene is, which still frightens me today. But I mean, people should practice good health safety still. But things are, vastly better. But again, no one wants to get sick.
No, exactly. And it's good. It's good to point out, I think, that you can wear a mask if you want to. There's nothing that says you can't.
That's absolutely correct. And any establishment says you can't is kind of interesting, because now you're telling you can't keep yourself safe, and quite frankly, one of the most inintrusive ways to other people.
Right. It has no impact on people around you. Exactly. It's just now, especially with the high quality masks, it's strictly for your own protection.
Precisely. So, things are getting better, but as I tell folks, the death count is still higher than I think any of us would like to see, staying in the double digits daily. And like we're seeing around the world, it's predominantly the unvaccinated who are taking the highest severity of illness, particularly ICU, and it is disproportionately higher on the death count, sadly, on the unvaccinated folks on a global level. So, as the wave is pretty much finished in Massachusetts and the Northeast corridor, places in Asia is now facing their massive surge. Some places like China and Hong Kong and Taiwan and Macau have adopted zero tolerance. Countries like Korea and Thailand and Philippines have adjusted to can we live with this and manage the surges? And we'll see how they handle it. Given the fact there's obviously plenty of lessons learned from the United States of what you should and shouldn't do. Like we should be learning from South Africa and Europe on things you should and shouldn't do as we move through. But Omicron B2 is much more infectious than the original Omicron or Delta or Alpha or the original. I was watching today, the Omicron, original Omicron is about 70 times more infectious than Delta. And B2 is 1.5 more infectious than Omicron, which means that it's 1.5 times 70 from Delta, which is, easy math of 5 times more infectious than or is it more than that? 1.5. So yeah, it's actually more than that. It's like 150 times more infectious. So, than the original Delta. So I can't do math, as you can all tell, but you guys can get the gist of the problem.
Given the current lull, Jackie, what do you think the state should be doing to kind of, I guess, brace itself for any kind of upcoming surge or new pandemic?
Well, unfortunately, the thing, a problem with Omicron and other diseases that you don't know till it shows up. So as we've said over and over again, the news, you watch it in the news, you say it all the time, it's all data driven. every scientist, every doctor, all government officials are watching data. And once the surge occurs, when a high infection rate due to testing, that test you can't find out, you are able to start to see a rise in numbers, which then you have to respond to. The problem of Omicron and potentially other variants, if it spreads fast enough, by the time we respond, it's almost too late. And that's the inherent problem. And one thing people don't realize is Omicron B2 is now being referred as a stealth COVID or stealth Omicron, because while your rapid home test will likely catch it, the rapid home tests are very good, and especially do it twice, once every 72 hours to do a second confirmation. The scientists on the PCR tests and other more tests to find the genetics of it are having more trouble identifying Omicron B2. And why is that important to us? It's important to understand what the spread rate is going to look like from a scientific standpoint. Now, definitely your rapid test, your walk-in test, that's going to be probably commonplace by summertime at CVS's and others, will tell you if you're sick or not. That isn't the concern. Scientists and doctors want to know what variant or version we're dealing with, so we have an idea what the spread rate, the severity of illness, and things like that. However, you won't know until it comes up. And this is why this is such an uncertain situation. And also, a lot of, I'm sorry, look, it creates aggravation for all of us. I'm aggravated too, right? I mean, mask on, mask off, go in, go out. We all share the same exhaustion of this. But there's no way for us to predict until it shows up.
Yeah, although the wastewater data is a pretty good indicator.
Yeah, MWA represents more than 40%-ish of communities, or basically a third of the population. So 40% is like 53. I can't remember the number. As you guys have discovered time, my numbers ain't good, but I mean, it represents well into, 1.5 million of the population.
Right.
So it's a very large sampling of 7 million people. And, but still, I mean, you're going to do monitoring constantly, but it's still testing as the, way to go. So obviously I suspect, if people have, any basic symptoms of COVID, high recommendations, rapid testing, particularly if you've been outdoor exposed to people. If you've been in limited human contact and you got the sniffles, the odds are good that you just had a cold.
Right. Yeah. Can we talk a little bit about the spending bill, Jackie, that was approved this week?
Sure. We did a $1.6 billion deficiency budget. In the old days, we called them deficiency budgets. We call them supplemental budgets now. Short of it is strictly bills. We're paying bills. And it's probably the largest one I've seen a governor filed. But we're living in unusual times. Housing assistance, LIHEAP, which is low income field assistance program, which obviously right now with the war in Ukraine has become even more critical, and other types of COVID related and snow removal and things like that. So it's not an exciting spending piece. There is no pork in it, essentially, so to speak. And also we're anticipating a large number of refunds. So, a lot of the stuff that we do with these supplemental budgets bake in the fact that the state is not going to get certain amounts of revenue. Thankfully, FY22 has been extraordinarily strong by anybody's expectations, which means we won't take as much a hit on refunds and credits. And we also are exempting from state taxes the emergency pay that we approved last winter, the $500 emergency pay. So we're not going to be collecting taxes on that, given the strong revenue numbers there. But again, it's been very unpredictable. Inflation will have a definite impact on the economy, even though unemployment rate is below 4% or floating right around there, depending on what month we're in. And there are jobs being added, but wages and inflations don't seem to match up still. And, and with the war in Ukraine and obviously energy prices, but not just energy prices. I mean, a lot of other things too. I mean, that's the one that dominates the news, but I mean, supply chain issues and wheat. I mean, Russia and Ukraine, especially Ukraine, contribute to 25% of the wheat production on the planetary level. So, there's a whole bunch of other things that is impacted by this war that we'll be feeling at home more so. And, people in the stock markets, people trading commodities are trying to anticipate now, unlike dealing with COVID, to show up. They're on the anticipation level. So a lot of the price fluctuation on fuel and energy and wheat and other types of commodities under a lot of price structure speculation, because the people who trade in these markets are trying to anticipate future price.
Yeah, I know there was a failed attempt to suspend the state's gas tax. How do you feel about that?
Well, I don't know. People don't like paying our debts and getting roads and bridges fixed. I mean, I understand that other states looking to suspend the gas tax. Gas tax in Massachusetts is about 24 cents. It's not gonna, if gas prices go up to like $5, you won't even notice 24 cents is not there to begin with. But our transportation bond funding, and we're gonna have another transportation bond soon to match the do our match against the federal infrastructure bill. It's funded by things like the gas tax. Wall Street likes to see some type of revenue stream. And part of that also goes into the, which actually all goes into the, if what do you call it, the road and bridge or infrastructure trust fund. That's where the gas tax one goes. And then, some of that's used to pay roads and bridges. Some of it's secure against, our bonds. So, there was an argument on the floor. Well, Wall Street will care and help us out. No, they won't. I never seen a Wall Street banker say to a state or a city, hey, you can't pay your bills or you can't demonstrate your revenue stream anymore. Well, we won't affect your bond rating. We'll give you a better interest. I mean, what kind of world do these folks live in? I'm listening to the debate yesterday, like, oh, they'll help us out. I'm like, this is coming from the Republican Party. I'm like, no, I just don't see Wall Street bankers going, you cut off a revenue stream. We're going to give you a deal. I mean, these are like the arguments that just doesn't make common sense that we're dealing with these days. And I kind of chuckle because it's like, what? So, I mean, that's the short of it. If you don't want to you want all your projects suspended or delayed on road and bridge projects. You don't want us to be able to provide our match against the federal infrastructure bill. It's going to be difficult. And the federal infrastructure bill is $9.5-ish billion. $9.5-ish billion over the course of a decade. We got to match about 20-25%, depending on which project we're talking about, which the state's going to put up. And that will actually help municipalities too on the local level if they don't have to put up their share of the money. So, we're not talking about a small amount of money here that we're going to need good help from Wall Street on interest rates. And it's up to us to try to create the best scenario possible. And by the way, if we don't pay it now, you're going to pay for it later. So if we go like a year of a gas tax, well, what do you think is going to happen, folks? You want to take I'm going to have to vote for another spike in gas tax? You think I really want to do that in a year's time because we delayed a year? Now we're going to make up a year's worth of money. Yeah, that's a wonderful idea from my standpoint. Yeah, like I want to do that kind of thing. No, of course not.
So there has been discussion about looking into possible price gouging. Do you think that might be something that has some legs to it?
Not unlikely. The way the pricing works with gas stations, it's a fixed rate per gallon. So generally, it's anywhere between 3 and 7, or depends where you are in rent. I tell you a lot, it's rent driven. So obviously, if you're in a high rent area, you might be close to 7 or more cents. If you're in a more reasonable area, you can close to 5. But price competition with a lot of gas stations in the region creates a scenario where we have price structures fairly similar to each other, maybe within 1 or 2 cents. I don't know people realize that over the years, gas price structures have really kind of been competitive in a geographic zone and on being as close to each other as possible. And so gas stations are not gouging you. They're not. They're not a percentage of the cut of the action. It's a fixed cent on each gallon. So the question has become a price gouging on the providers, the wholesalers or the manufacturers. And again, we go back to the speculative market because while they themselves, provide the fuel and refine the fuel, I mean, those costs are predictable, but they can't predict what the commodity market's going to look like. So even though you see the barrel oil go up to $1.30, it was like $1.11 the other day, it's going to fluctuate a lot because people are trying to buy in anticipation for future price for resale, right? Buy low, sell high. And that's not an easy calculation. And they don't buy like $130, a barrel. They buy, 200 million barrels at a time, these commodity markets. So it can create massive shifts in the price structure. So now on the local level, people are trying to anticipate what those price structure will look like because they have to pay that gas like now. Gas stations do not get a IOU. It's COD, cash on delivery.
Right. Yep. Yeah. The Secretary of State argued that the gas that was purchased, before the price hikes, should have been kept at that price level. But these, as you say, these stations are saying, well, in the future, we're going to have to pay this much, so we need to charge this much to make up that difference.
Yeah, I hope people appreciate this with gas stations. I mean, if let's use the example, you bought your gasoline for a totality of $100 for the sake of easy math, and you're looking at price fluctuations, and you're not sure what the next shipment's going to come in, what price.
Right.
They suddenly charge you $140 as opposed to $100, but you're only making, let's say you're doing 5 cents, so you're making essentially $5.
Mhm.
So you get $105, but you have to pay $140 cash up front. You got a problem here. So obviously the gas stations are trying to also anticipate what the fuel cost is. We're talking to the wholesaler, which is also talking to the manufacturer, and all the delivery service and getting here. For example, when they truck your gas to the gas station, it's in a truck. The truck uses gas. The gas is paying the higher price of gas to get you the gas, right? A diesel, whether it be diesel or unleaded. So, those guys are really in a tough spot where they're going to have to adjust the price structure and trim, basically trim the size of the profits to, keep the lights on while trying to anticipate what the next shipment's going to cost them. And then when they get the bill, you hope it matches what they're thinking it should be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And let's face it, the people that are pumping your gas, the people that are fixing your cars at these locally owned service stations are not making huge profits. They're small, independently owned stations that are just trying to get by.
Yes, they're basically franchises. Small independent businesses are franchises. Again, that's why I've always been supportive of places like Dunkin' Donuts and McDonald's and such, because they're actual franchises. The small business owner has a franchise agreement. They run a small business. They run to the ground. It's not McDonald's problem in the end. They just get their cut of the action. As opposed to guys like Starbucks, which is a multinational corporation, giant octopus, which owns every single store, and all the profits go back to Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
The manager of that store only makes a salary, and you're never going to get rich on it. It's all run by Seattle. So, I always get a little frustrated by people that rally against, franchise businesses, because it's like, it's easy, it's good, it's easy politics, it's easy media. But I mean, he really took a good look at it. You should be protesting people like Starbucks.
Yeah, and many of those franchisees give back to their local communities, in terms of supporting local sports teams or civic organizations or what have you. They're the first ones to step up to the plate.
And also subject to individual price structures. While they're like a McDonald's franchise, does have to require, they require you to use McDonald's. Have to go to notches on your products, right?
Yep.
And you have to, state to certain menu items. At the same time, though, they have to pick up those costs. It's not like McDonald's gives them, those cups and those wrappers and that food. You still have to pay for it. There's that bulk shipping benefit.
Right.
However, there's not like they're getting bulk electrical benefit costs, right? So unlike Starbucks, where it's all shipped in from Central, for lack of a term, through their own supply chain system. It's again, the corporate entity controls the price structure in its entirety. So the markup is going to be very different because, different types of shareholder situation.
Mm-hmm. I know, Tacky, there's been talk too of the state looking to divest whatever assets it has in Russian-owned businesses. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I get nervous about the word divestment. And the reason is because in the state's case is the pension fund, and the pension fund is in pretty healthy shape. And it's actually pretty conservative overall. I talked to Perrick and Prim and those guys in the past, and they try to balance some social justice-ish type stuff against the pensioners' interests, because you don't have any money to pay the pensioners if you got a problem, and at the same time try to grow the fund in a reasonable manner. So one of the interesting things about the investment of Russian businesses, and again, I like to stress these are businesses that are Russian state-owned or Russian origin businesses, not Russians in the United States running a business,
right,
or Russians in Europe. For example, Stoli Vodka is not made in Russia. It's not incorporated in Russia. It's not really a Russian business. I believe it's a Latvian business. It's actually EU, it's a NATO country. But people looking at Stoli Vodka, this is a problem. So Stoli actually had to change the brand of their product to not use the word vodka in it anymore. Even though technically speaking, that is what the alcohol is. But back to the issue of divestment. The challenge is that you can't just unload stock if you got nowhere to unload the stock too.
Right. At the Russian stock market's closed.
Yeah, they opened and they closed. They're going to open and close, and foreign transactions are very difficult because we kind of like cut them off from the planet.
Mhm.
So, I mean, if people not notice, we have pretty much cut the financial system off, including the central banks, and all our government state-owned assets are frozen by EU countries and other allies of the United States, to just freeze all their assets. So for us to divest, those Russian portfolios from Russian stock markets requires us to sell them in the Russian stock market, which is nowhere to sell. On the flip side, though, they're not exactly making any dividends. So,
Yeah.
and thankfully the pension fund is big and diversified. They can withstand, different hits. As the pension fund learned in 03 and 08, those two big recessions, the stock market took a huge smack. And pension fund had learned from those two huge recessions how to not to put their eggs in one basket, so to speak, and diversify. And also Bernie Madoff, people remember him. I mean, he ruined some pension funds around the country too, where people put in like 10% plus of their pension fund in there. And when that Ponzi scheme collapsed, it took a massive hit.
Yeah.
We are very conservative and very diversified in Massachusetts. So the Russian market stocks, are taking a dive.
Yeah.
But there's no way to get rid of it. I mean, you got to go back to the market it came from. And I got the SEC problem. Is the SEC going to let us get rid of stuff? Or we're going to continue to freeze? And, as I say, this one act of war has permanently changed a relationship between Russia and the rest of the world. And I don't see this going back to the way it was anytime soon. This is a damage to the Russian economy for going to be a decade, I suspect, if this continues, or just continuous damage.
Yeah.
And, what happens, recovery is going to be very challenging.
As I understand it, the state only has a very, very small, like a 0.2% of its pension funds invested in Russian businesses, about $140 million. So it's very negligible.
Yeah, the pension fund is, I think, close to $80 billion now.
Something like
that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's negligible in terms of size of the fund. And like I said, those are now frozen assets. So it's not like the Russians are making any money or losing money. I mean, everything's trapped in stasis, which for its purpose is losing money. You can't get at your assets, you're losing money.
Right. What do you think about the whole situation in Ukraine, Tacky? I mean, just from a personal perspective.
Well, it's absolutely horrifying. Obviously, we've seen tragedies in Sudan, we've seen Syria, Somalia. There's a war in Ethiopia right now too. I mean, it's not like there's no global conflicts. It's just that we don't always pay attention to stuff what's going on around us. And of course, Afghanistan had consumed our minds for a long time. The United States as well as Iraq. But I mean, this is the largest single two-country invasion we've seen really since World War II. I mean, it's 44 million people, 150 million people in Russia. It's the second biggest army in the world by raw numbers and equipment. So it's a major power. We've not seen a major power do an invasion in the European theater in like ever since World War II. I mean, this Cold War stuff, I mean, playing in other people's elections, CIA, cloak and dagger type things. But I mean, in terms of like straight up, like we're gonna march in and blow you up, it's frightening. And people saw that, they shelled a nuclear power plant. I mean, this is not good, folks.
Right.
So why does it matter to the United States? I mean, this isn't like a war in Ethiopia, which doesn't have the same impact on us, even though it's also a huge human tragedy. You should look it up if you have not. Obviously, I talk about wheat. We talk about energy. Ukraine is a major fossil fuel country. It is a developing nation in the sense that they do have hospitals, they have universities. You've seen on the news, students from all over the world do go to school in Ukraine. It's actually part of the economy. Big tourist country as well. They had to, remake themselves, but also the access to the Black Sea. I mean, to get Russia to get any warm water ports, because the only other ports in the North Sea, Finland, Norway, all the cold spots, you need to get to the Mediterranean. And the Turks, actually, Turkey controls the strait from the Black Sea into the Mediterranean. The Black Sea is big. I mean, it's a big sea. So if they control basically all of the ports in Ukraine plus their sections, they control the entire access point for trade to come in and out of that region. The human tragedy is incredible. I mean, as pointed out, the Syrian conflict, sent 1 million people into the EU. Obviously, a lot of countries like Poland has taken somewhat of a U.S. stance of anti-immigration in some ways, a very Trumpian sort of. I don't want to use that word exactly, but for the sake of easy context for everyone listening, it's a little more complex. But I mean, Poland had one point, put troops on the border of Belarus because Belarus's solution to torturing Poland was throw all the Syrian refugees into Poland, and that didn't go well. Now you got Ukrainians coming over, 2 million Ukrainians escaping any way they can to Moldova, Romania, and Poland in particular. And the Polish basically opened the border and says just let everybody through.
Yeah.
And 2 million people against 44 million escaping and counting is frightening. And there's immense bravery of people who love the country. One of the best interviews was a woman who says, from Ukraine says, our government's corrupt. It's not in good shape. We're unhappy of everything. But essentially, she said, our problem to fix is Ukrainians. It's not the Russians' problem. So you're invading the country, claiming to be liberators. Liberators of what? It's a democracy. I mean, it's like saying that we should be invading the United States because we had an insurrection on January 6th of last year. Well, that is
so Canada should come down and liberate us, right? Yeah,
exactly. This is our problem, not your problem. This is why we don't get involved in civil wars in other countries. This is a domestic problem. We can sanction, we can make statements, we can do all kinds of things, but we're not going to go marching troops in your civil war in the 21st century because it's a domestic issue. This is not a domestic issue. This is a second biggest military power invading a significantly smaller country, causing humanitarian crisis, destroying hospitals, destroying schools, killing children. I projected, my personal projection was maybe up to 15,000 civilian casualties this week. I might be conservative on this number with the way they're just trying to shell out. And this is very much a early 20th century tactic of war. The way you get your population to submit is just bomb the living life out of all of them and make the population miserable and to hope the population will overthrow the government.
Right. Yeah.
That's what's going on here. They're putting fear in the people to say, oh my God, these Russians are going to destroy us all. Let's overthrow the government and bring the Russians in. I mean, this isn't a tactic, folks.
It's a terror tactic, right? Yeah.
This was done in the 20th century. This is not new. It's just they're operating in that method. And obviously, Ukrainian people, we've seen, has really done a great job controlling the messaging on a global level. And again, the people in Ukraine believe this is their problem. It's not your problem to solve, and we're going to defend our country and then win, and then we'll solve our government problems domestic.
Yeah, I interviewed an IT consultant in Ukraine earlier this week, and he was very blunt. He said, I did not vote for the current Ukrainian president Zelensky, but I fully support him and support my country. That's his feeling.
Yeah, I was watching a bit of European news, and one of Putin's calculations of invading Ukraine was the low approval rating of both the parliament and the president, and the legislative executive bodies were both very, very low poll ratings. I mean, worst poll ratings in the United States. I mean, they were looking like 80% on approval. So part of the thinking of Putin was that, well, they're clearly doesn't like their government. If I come in and liberate them, so to speak, the people will love me. And obviously that was not true.
Yeah, he really miscalculated that for sure. They've had 30 years of independence, and I think they like the taste of it.
And they've been in war with Russia sort of for 8 years, ever since the invasion of the Donbas and the Donbas, can't pronounce anything, and the Crimea regions.
Yep.
They've been fighting on the skirmishes of that border war essentially for 8 years. They've had 8 years to ramp up the military. They're a professional military. And I think people don't quite understand exactly how well equipped and how closely aligned to the EU, NATO, and US regarding intelligence data. They were ready for a fight, and they've proven it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you think he'll stop in Ukraine?
No.
Really?
No. I mean, the reality is that you talk about rebuilding the Russian Empire, the Soviet Union, but it's also, this is a guy from the Cold War. I mean, I also talk about Biden being Vietnam, Cold War, World War II kind of guy. Yeah. He's 76-year-old. Putin is not a young person either. He was around when the Berlin Wall fell. He was actually in East Germany when that occurred. And, he was able to figure out how to make money in the post-Soviet Union and worked his way to power to what you see today. And, it's clear that he's still operating under a 20th century tactics in Ukraine and, other places. But he's too deep in,
Hmm.
and I think people understand this. If you look weak, particularly at that type of situation where you're not really a democratic system, someone's going to replace you.
Hmm. Okay.
It doesn't matter how much money you have. It won't matter because you might be, in a bad place.
Mhm.
They try to get rid of you. And of course, the Russians control the state media. They pretty
Mhm.
much made it possible for third-party media, outside country media to broadcast or provide information. And they're going out for the internet very much like how China does in terms of censoring information to the public. 60% of the population plus, believes this is a just and right military operation to secure Russia,
Yeah.
not an invasion. And of course, you guys heard about this theory that they'll put out there into the world and local their own local media that the U.S. was doing chemical weapon plants inside Kiev. Yeah, no, of course not, right? But it's almost like an excuse for them to use chemical weapons or biological weapons because they claim it exists in the country. They're kind of like making up their own excuses.
And they can go unchecked because, as you say, there's a blackout in independent news.
Well, the Ukrainian forces, are going to get armed. I mean, any former Soviet bloc country like, Poland, Latvia, all the Baltic states, you think they're going to put up with this? I mean, no, they've already lived under oppressive rule. They don't want to do this a second time.
Right.
Enjoyed the EU. They've enjoyed NATO. They enjoyed democratic. Enjoyed freedom of travel inside Europe. They enjoyed, a lot of a middle class life that we enjoy here a very long time in this country. They've had this middle class lifestyle much shorter time than we have, the people. And I don't see people want to give that up. So the Russians have actually one big mathematical problem, which is again, it's the 44 man, 42 man, and dropping a bit. But the only solution to deal with a population size is just wholesale slaughter.
Yeah.
Because Ukrainian men are required to stay in the country from 18 and 60, although suspect some a little younger and some a little older staying behind, picking up a weapon or creating barriers or providing medical assistance or food or whatever skills they have to support fellow countrymen in the government. It doesn't matter if you can't fire a weapon. You could, if you have medical skills, you're going to go out there. If you know how to cook, you're going to go out there. If you know how to scavenge, you're going to go out there. If you're an iron welder, you're going to start making barriers. I mean, people who do whatever it takes. And this is a problem for Putin because it's not just people with guns, but they have a whole, supply chain ability in Ukraine to try to do whatever it takes to, make it miserable for the Russian military.
Yeah.
And Putin's already hired 1,000 mercenaries. And he's claiming he's using no conscripts, which is a sell to the Russian people, but the Russian army is almost 2/3 conscript.
Conscript? What is that, Jackie?
Mandatory military service.
Okay.
So this is something that U.S. really has never done ever, is that in many, many countries, folks, between the age of 18 and 20, before you can go to college, you have to do military service. Some countries let you defer, like Singapore. You can go to college and come back and do your 2 years of military service. So, places like Taiwan, Korea, Ukraine, a lot of countries are actually required to do basically 14 to 2 years-ish of military service. Some of the, you have to shoot a weapon, how to be part of national defense. You have to be able to, operate military systems at some level or be able to rapidly train. We have the National Guard here, but the National Guard's voluntary.
So is the military. Yeah.
Yeah, that's mandatory. A lot of places in the world have conscripts, and I don't think people understand here how fortunate they are. When I was in Brandeis, many, like 3 decades ago now, I met folks that was able to avoid conscript for their time in government, but fully aware once they go back to country of origin, they're going to have to do the military time.
We did have the draft, of course, years ago, but that's been gone for a long time.
Yeah, it's not exactly the same thing.
Right.
Well, draft during war means that, we're calling up reservists, essentially reservists, to have rapid training and throw them on the front lines quickly. Conscription means that, you got to be military ready when they call on you because you receive your training in your late teens, early 20s. So not to say that everybody in Ukraine is an expert marksman, but they will have, some basic understanding of their firearms.
Sure. Interesting. Do you think this whole situation is going to delay the recovery from the pandemic here?
Yes, economically, it will. I mean, obviously, we felt, I said earlier about inflation. Obviously, there's a lot of components. There's not just energy. There's a whole lot of other components, inflation. But also, it may cause a problem with spread. I mean, Ukraine is not exactly a country that got a lot of vaccine.
Mm.
It's five. Not a lot of people have confidence. Russia's COVID vaccination rate is not all that great. So, one of the things, that worried me right off the bat, and obviously, the priority is to escape the war. I mean, that's number one priority. But obviously, if Omicron infection is, given its spread, obviously you're going to have a, opportunity for more spread going around, and potentially maybe another mutation if there isn't higher vaccination rates. And this is kind of the tragedy of a lot of places where they're in a civil war, like, Burma, now called Myanmar. It's amidst the civil war, very low vaccination rate, very high COVID, complete total infrastructure from the military junta screwing the place up. Ukraine, we've seen the footage, total, devastation in major cities. That's kind of one of the unspoken thing about this news cycle. About, the COVID spread through Europe, and these refugees are going to be coming in to a lot of European countries and also the United States, and we're going to have to, like we did with the Afghans and the Haitians, we're going to have to manage COVID vaccination rates and identification as they come in. I mean, who knows that? How are we going to have vaccination cards? I mean, the hospital's been blown up. The physicians somewhere.
Right. Yeah. Understand the supplemental budget that was just approved included money to help Ukrainian refugees here in Massachusetts. Is that right?
Yeah, we put aside some money in anticipation of, we revisit the issues, get to the budget, we revisit the issue again, as the year go along into most likely next year, as we look at the influx of Afghan refugees. We're well over 2,000 and probably more. And now we're looking at influx of Ukrainian refugees as well. As you guys all see, I mean, there's a lot of solidarity, not just among European nations and others, but I mean, Americans in a whole, just, no matter where you're from or where your family's from, that this war is, the tragedy is unjustifiable and, a humanitarian crisis. I mean, 2 million people in under 2 weeks. No one's seen that kind of migration ever. Even in World War II, I mean, there was migration because they were trying to escape the Germans, just bulldozing through Eastern Europe. But 2 million people in 2 weeks. Yeah, it's unfathomable. It's unfathomable. And we're so far away from the United States. We're just getting news coverage and watching social media. But I mean, imagine being on the ground in places like Poland and Moldova. Moldova is not a rich country, by the way. They don't have a lot of resources, and the neighbor next door is Romania. So I mean, people going through Moldova to get to Romania, and again, not an EU country and all that, but not wealthy.
Right.
I mean, people keep forgetting exactly how better position the United States is. We're at $23 trillion GDP. Russia's a $1.4 trillion GDP and shrinking fast. While, you're looking at, Romania, which doesn't even blip in the top 50.
Yeah, it's going to be a tremendous strain on those countries for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And, I think sometimes people forget, how good is it really here. And, just the raw scale of just not even comparable size governments, militaries, but also economies to be able to provide support and assistance.
Curious to see if this situation brings more bipartisanship to our nation's capital.
No, these no.
Tacky.
Yes,
Always glass half empty.
very much so. I mean, they got midterm elections going up. Frankly, and people really are just domestic minded in terms of a lot of their politics. They don't really think globally. We just don't. I mean, most people don't even know. Like I said, the civil war in Myanmar, the war in Ethiopia. People don't know, and they don't care because it doesn't put right in front of them in their news or the social media feed saying this is now something happening. It's always going to be their domestic issues and also their value issues that we've seen that's actually driving a lot where people are trying to impose their values on other folks because they're afraid of things that aren't different. That difference, okay. Yeah. So you know, I think a lot of this rhetoric on, these so-called wedge or single issues in these midterm elections in both primaries and finals will be coming up. People are not electing your state officials or your federal officials to discuss international policy.
True. Yeah.
Honestly, we should know something about international policy. We're a global economy.
Yeah.
But no, that's not going to happen. The same partisan rhetoric in elections and in Washington is how they get their fundraising. And they don't like this type of fundraising where you just bash people to make money for yourself and to appease a small number of super donors that can raise you a ton of money if you follow their small group of folks trying to influence the rest of us. And and just pushing their their domestic agenda, really in a tough, kind of in a tough way. Is again, I mean, it's not like Ukrainians are voting for us.
Mm-hmm.
We have to have a local population vote for us, and it's responding to your population. And I talked about this last time. And guys like Putin and Xi in China are relying on our impact on our wallets, try to influence guys like me, but more importantly, guys like Steve Lynch and Liz Warren and Ed Markey, because you're hurting at home. Well, let's change our international policy to be capitulating to other big economies and big militaries because your wallet is hurting at home. So let's give the Chinese the run of anything they want, or give the Russians Ukraine. What do I care? You're hurting me in my pocket. That's what they're relying on. I promise you, they know. Some reason people don't think we live in this isolated world where people don't know what's going on here. I mean, we have an open free media. Everything you post on social media, trust me, they can find out overseas what you're saying, and they can gauge what the mood of the public is here. And they feel that if your pocketbook is hurt bad enough, you're going to call the president, your congressman, your senator, and say, I'm hurting. Who cares what happens to these people? Let's move on. And that's what they're hoping will happen.
Yeah. Can we switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit about, is there a bill, Tacky, about right to life or right to die in Massachusetts that's being debated?
Yeah, it's not new. Assisted suicide is not a new issue. It's been around for well past a decade. There was actually the ballot question, remember, about 8 years ago. So now there was a ballot question. It was defeated narrowly by a very small margin. I think it was under 2% margin. And the issue keeps resurfacing. But, I always tell folks a lot of our decision-making when it's done by ballot question is, I know it's an old ballot question now, but it gives us a statewide polling without actually doing polling, right? I mean, your polling means nothing until you actually have the votes come in.
Right.
This is going to be a continued conversation. It's been going on well into a decade, and it's going to continue again.
Okay. Do you have a particular feeling about it either way?
Yeah, I've always had a lot of hesitation in this because modern medicine is pretty incredible about its ability to, save people from the brink. And also, we also have other ways to make people much more comfortable. Medical marijuana comes to mind right away. I have a friend of mine that was dying of prostate cancer, had very good quality of life right to the very end. And it wasn't to like the last moments quality of life declined. And largely thanks to medical marijuana. In that instance, he was, he was going to go. But, modern medicine has given you a higher quality of life longer to enjoy with your loved ones and your loved ones to enjoy with you. So, I mean, right now the proposal, I believe, is that you have 6 months less to live. You have to couple of verified doctors. You have to have, demonstrate sound mind and conscience. You have to demonstrate a lot of things. But as we've seen, just a little thing like medical marijuana, maybe we should try something, as kind of give you a better quality of life to the end. So, like I said, I've always had a bit of hesitation just because every time this comes up, something in our world changes rapidly. Like, we talked about COVID a lot last year. We didn't know what we were doing. A lot of people were dying because the medical community had no idea what they were dealing with. Right. Suddenly we have life-saving drugs, or at least drugs that have potential to try to make you recover from getting off a ventilator.
Yeah, the new federal policy, I guess, is test and then treat right at that same moment. If you're detected to be positive, to start the treatment right away.
Yeah, and that's within the past, not even 2 years at this point. I mean, 2 years today that we had the state of emergency.
Right.
But I mean, in terms of, rapid treatment, I mean, if you, apply to end of life options, people, in ventilators are conscious and aware of what's going on and decide they want to put a plug where the medicine's available in the next 3 days.
Yeah. All right.
And I guess an extreme example of mine, Jay. I am making an extreme example.
Yeah, but I understand the point. The technologies, medical technology is advancing very, very rapidly. So you don't know. You don't know what the future holds.
Yeah, and that makes it a little more difficult to understand because the people that get left behind saying "what if" is your family members, not you. But I do understand that people don't want to die in suffering. I get it. I
Yeah.
get that.
Yeah.
But but then people are going to say "what if" it's not you who's gone. It's going to be people who have been left behind.
Any pandemic era state regulations advancing or continuing through this bill that was just passed, Jackie?
Well, we expand so-called outdoor dining and takeout cocktails and beer and wine until April 1st of 2023.
Okay.
I hope to be with you on April 1st, 2023. This is an election cycle.
Speaking of not knowing what the future, yeah.
Yeah. But this is a message I'm going to stop beating the drum on. I did this with Mark Crosby last week. Takeout dining does not really end on April 1st, 2023. You've always had takeout dining ability on the local level. Municipalities, a licensed board, and building inspectors, or inspectional services, depending what we're talking about, as well as the health boards, all have the ability to do outdoor dining. That is not the problem. So the news media has really mischaracterized this as like outdoor dining never existed before until we created this law that suspended all the laws. So you have no due process. You can't complain about it. You have no public hearing. You have nothing, folks. That's essentially what occurred in pandemic. And of course, given the uncertainty and we're trying to keep the industry alive any way possible, we create a mechanism for municipalities to just, who cares about due process and the public? We're just going to do whatever to save these businesses. And I think the public was tolerating it to a point. And then the other argument was regarding the ABCC review process regarding expansion alcohol licensing in contiguous spaces, meaning that you want to have alcohol in additional spaces than the original license allows, which in this case, outdoor dining. So, we get that too, in suspending that and only really providing just some notice to know what's going on. And of course, there was a policy regarding originally just beer and wine. And the policy on beer and wine originally during pandemic, the height of pandemic was that, beer goes bad.
Yep.
So a restaurant buys the beer, the wholesaler, you buy it from the wholesaler, you can't use it, goes back to wholesale has to destroy it, costs them money. They can't get the money back from the manufacturer. They hope to get money back from manufacturer loses money. You guys get the whole idea of how it works. So the idea is that, the faster you can get rid of this beer through takeout process, actually helps everybody at some level. It saves us destroying, quite frankly, it's alcohol. You have to destroy it properly. And try to at least get rid of inventory as fast as possible. Obviously, we're at a different time now. It's a policy that should be revisited and take a look at again, whether it makes sense. And of course, takeout alcohol includes things like DoorDash, Uber, and delivery services. I have a lot of issues with that. Largely, the fact that people aren't checking IDs, they're dropping and running. I mean, during a pandemic, heavy pandemic, people were exactly like knocking your door, checking your ID, like, here you go, and just dash. Or just leaving your front door, hit the doorbell and run if it's good weather, right? So, and also because large volume, they had to do a lot of orders. So, with this was more time. The legislative session ends on July 31st, provided that we don't have another crises, that it creates another situation where there is no end of session. Hopefully, there'll be no crisis to do that. And gives me some breathing space because I'm the guy dealing with alcohol and outdoor dining, chair of the committee, to work with my co-chair and discussing how to manage this. And I will have a plan by session's end, but legislative changes in the off season between July and end of July or August 1st to the new session. January, it's informal sessions. Any one person can stop a bill. And if I come up with legislative fixes, it would probably have to happen sometime in 2023.
Okay. Something to look forward to. What about the provision for remote public hearings? When does that expire?
I believe that's the end of fiscal year, this June.
Okay.
At this stage, as we talked about, the mask mandates have ended in Boston. Vaccine card mandates have ended in Boston. Most of us have figured out how to do social distancing if that's what your desire is wearing masks. And hopefully with vaccinations, I believe we're at almost 79% 2-dose vaccination in Massachusetts.
Yep.
We're at 95%, which for the purpose of statistics, is closest we're going to get. The basic statistics, statistically speaking, we'll say 95% of one dose vaccination. They basically stop counting at this point.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So, ideally, we want to be close to 90% two-dose vaccination because Omicron is that much more infectious.
Yep.
It still can make you sick. You can still be asymptomatic transmitter, potentially. But the alternative is being really sick in a ventilation in ICU. All municipalities should have some ideas of what they should be going forward regarding in-person. I understand town meetings may be hard if you live in a town, you have open town meeting, everyone just kind of shows up in a big room and crammed together like sardines.
Right.
And also state boards. An interesting feedback, particularly from state boards, is the fact that since people who sit on boards all over from over the state, they're looking at more hybrid models going forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you don't want to have to drive from Amherst to Boston if you don't have to, right?
Yeah, or Wilmington, any like a 4-hour drive to do like a 2-hour hearing once a week. So, I mean, that is something that may be becoming permanent. We'll be hearing from administration and other executive branch offices, how they would like to do some combination. At the legislative level, you guys all know, particularly with my state representative Tacky Chan Facebook page, I just spent 2 years trying to figure out how to make what I'm doing right now, talking to you, work in a public hearing format. This was a lot of trial and error, a lot of technology problems to make it work. And we've received feedback from my colleagues who are from much further distance from Boston and how it's been easier for their constituents to convey their message to us through this format. Sure. But again, also a lot of management issues. It's a little bit trickier to be in person. Difficult to try to move people out of order, try to move people don't show up. It becomes a real problem in this format. It's harder to figure out if I can just move along. You're having technical difficulties. The logistics are very different. Right. But I suspect that we will have moving into 2023. I mean, I'm just going to have public hearings in this format for remainder of 2022. But moving 2023, provided I'm still a chair, who knows? I'm going to need to talk to whomever my co-chair is and staff and start to rethink about some type of hybrid model. The state technology is not well designed for hybrid. It's Microsoft Teams. They can't run more than 3 things on Microsoft Teams at one time right now, which is a big problem because there's 28 joint committees. Wow. 32, but 28 actually have a lot of bills. The other 4 don't have as many. But I mean, it's 20. You could have potentially 21 hearings in 1 week. Some committees do 2 hearings in 1 week, and then you have a formal session. We don't have the personnel technology wise, which is why this is run on my office staff and myself. And if you watch the video, sometimes you see me completely blank out because we have a tech support problem. My co-chair, Sue Moran, is actually running the hearing. And and one of the people trying to testify had all kinds of problems. So I'm on, the chat box on my phone, trying to figure out how come this person can't get on. And it's like the other chair becomes tech support. I'm trying to pay attention to the hearing. We're trying to solve a problem at the same time. Yep. So you see what I'm not sharing every so often. There's that look on my face, oh no. And then, one of the reps get dropped off and, it's different. So it's almost like the other chair is this, is the tech support on the committee. So when I'm on, Sue Moran's, dealing with some of these logistical issues when I'm chairing the hearing virtually. So, I think people don't, this is why we have this show. It gives you an idea of what goes on behind the scenes that you don't realize that, I actually, myself, as well as staff and my co-chairs and their staff, are trying to run things as smooth as possible. And things happen that we can't anticipate and we have to deal with. So, learn a lot of lessons in 2023. We'll reevaluate how we're going to do hearings, but remainder 2022, I have a public hearing coming up Monday, the 14th, on the retail alcohol license expansion ballot question. Oh, okay. So that's 1 p.m. on Monday on State Representative Tacky Chan's Facebook. If you want to come take a look, if you miss it, it's going to be recording provided on the MAlegislature.gov, MAlegislature.gov website under the public hearing section, and they can watch the recording there. We'll keep improvising, figuring it out no matter what happens. Okay. I personally think we've been fairly successful and try to not torture people too badly, so to speak, in video.
Yeah, well, I mean, the accessibility and convenience factor, you can't argue with. It's immeasurable, really. Certainly in the middle of a blizzard, too. I mean, it definitely has advantages that it's never going to go away.
No, as long as we can maintain an interconnection,
Right.
or if you lose your internet wire, you can always, if your phone has some roaming ability, you got 5G, you won't get, it won't be the same as
No.
exactly the same as wire, but I mean, it's really good.
Yeah,
It's
and
really-
there's still, the old type telephone technology. You can still listen and talk too without being
yeah,
seen.
you can zoom in on the telephone
Yep.
if you lose internet connection. So, there are ways to make it happen.
Yeah.
Sometimes you'll see me on the screen, or we're having some technical problems. Maybe you won't see me on the screen. I have to dial in, but somehow we'll be there.
That's right. Yep.
So, it's, and I don't think lessons are done yet as we keep moving forward. We'll learn how to do things. We'll keep learning how to do things.
Seems like a good point to ask you to give out your information, contact information, Tacky.
Sure, 617-722-2014, 617-722-2014. The State House is open, as you are aware of. We're taking people of no mask requirement, no vaccination card requirement. However, internal offices can do what they need to do. Staff and I are discussing what continuation of contact tracing. God forbid someone gets sick and you don't know about it.
Right.
So we're discussing that matter still, as well as continuation of doing that and mask requirements and things like that internally. So we're running mostly a skeleton staff, but right now, we've always had a fairly smooth running. I know it's not perfect, fairly smooth running virtual. So we're doing actually a hybrid right now. So 617-722-2014, give us a ring. Obviously, you can email me at tacky.chan, tackey.chan at nmahouse.gov. I'll get your email. You'll hear prioritized, and sometimes just stuff ends up in junk mail. So I do check that too now, trying to find you in my junk mail. Gotta love Microsoft Outlook. They just
it always thinks it knows what's best for us. Yeah.
yeah, I have the same problems the rest of you guys have. Okay, I mean, if you do Microsoft Outlook, you know what I'm talking about. And then obviously, I talk about State Representative Tacky Chan Facebook. There's a public hearing coming up. You guys want to see me again? I'm there. And then State tackychan.org. Again, it's a reference site more than anything else for phone numbers and things like that are important. And of course, being here viewing QATV, you can watch on my past shows and see how I have new information from old information, because the old information is no good anymore.
That's why we do it every week, because things change. Really appreciate it, Tacky. Great to talk to you.
Good to talk to you, Joe. And I'll see you in a week's time.
All right. Take care.